With all this chaos and talks of civil war and World War III, I decided to break down the legal arguments, the current state of the border crisis, and a little bit of the world, and how all of this is similar to a major historical event in world history that changed the world forever. So let's break away from normalcy bias and get right into it. Before we begin, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And now let's discuss the 10th Amendment. Two sentences tucked away in the Bill of Rights, yet they pack a powerful punch. It states, the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. But it's not just legal jargon. It's a cornerstone of American federalism, a constant tug of war between centralized power and state autonomy. Take the ongoing debate over healthcare, for example. The Affordable Health Care Act, under its individual mandate, was initially challenged as exceeding federal power under the Commerce Clause. The Supreme Court, using the 10th Amendment as a guiding principle, ultimately upheld the law's core provisions but struck down the mandate as exceeding federal authority. This ruling highlighted the complex dance between federal regulation and state control over individual health choices. And then there's education. Common Core standards aimed at establishing national benchmarks faced opposition from some states who saw it as federal intrusion into the authority over curriculum and testing. This debate reignited this conversation about states' rights and the role of the federal government in setting educational standards. And many are unaware that the state will only receive federal funding if they use Common Core standards as their baseline in creating standards for their states. This leads uh, to the mandated tests that students have to take in public schools. So, no state testing, no funding. But the 10th Amendment isn't a static shield. It's interpreted and applied differently across time and context. Emerging issues with environmental regulation, technology oversight, and data privacy all raise questions about federal versus state authority, prompting us to continuously revisit the delicate balance enshrined in those two powerful sentences. The 10th Amendment is not a simple answer to a complex challenge, or challenges, I should say. It's a framework for an ongoing debate, a reminder that power and responsibility are shared and that the line between federal and state authority are rarely clear cut. It's a call for constant dialogue, collaboration, and a commitment to finding solutions that respect both national unity and state autonomy. Remember, the 10th Amendment is not fixed destination. It's not fixed. That's why it's so vague compared to the other amendments, which is very much more clear cut. 10th Amendment is a map guiding us on the ever evolving journey of defining our federal republic. The Constitution itself doesn't explicitly state that states cannot protect their rights. In fact, several amendments and clauses throughout the document actually reinforce the rights of states. Here are some key points to consider. The 10th Amendment is the most frequently cited provision regarding state rights. It states the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution nor prohibited by it to the states are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. This essentially means that any powers not given to the federal government by the Constitution belong to the states or the people themselves. And then there's federalism. The entire structure of the US government is based on federalism, which divides power between the federal government and the states. This system inherently grants states the ability to govern themselves with certain parameters. And then there's the supremacy clause. This clause, Article 4, Clause 2, establishes the Constitution and federal laws made in per pursuance thereof as the supreme law of the land. However, it is important to note that the supremacy only applies to areas where the federal government has legitimate constitutional authority. If a state law conflicts with a federal law in an area outside of federal power, the state law may still be valid. Then there's other amendments. Several amendments, such as the First, the Ninth, and the 10th, specifically reserve certain rights to the states or the people, further emphasizing the limitations on federal power. However, it is important to acknowledge that there are complexities and potential conflicts. While states have rights, they cannot act in ways that violate the Constitution or infringe upon individual rights guaranteed by the Bill of Rights. Additionally, the Supreme Court has the power to interpret the Constitution and determine the validity of state laws, potentially limiting state actions deemed unconstitutional. Therefore, it's more accurate to say the states can protect their rights within the framework of the Constitution and establish balance of power between federal and state governments. It's a dynamic system with ongoing interpretations and potential conflicts, making it crucial to examine each situation on a case by case basis to understand the specific rights and limitations involved. Now, describing the current situation between Texas and the federal government and the Mexico Texas border requires a careful navigating of political complexity. So let's break down some key points and diverse perspectives. And I have to emphasize diverse perspectives. Tensions over the border security. So here's the Texas actions. Governor Greg Abbott has implemented various measures, including deploying the National Guard, installing razor wire fencing, and arresting migrants on state trespassing charges. He argues these actions are necessary to address what he sees as insufficient federal border security measures. The federal response, as far as the Biden administration is concerned, has challenged these actions in court, arguing they violate federal authority and impede immigration process. The Supreme Court recently ruled in favor of the federal government on removing some razor wire, highlighting legal complexities. Now, here's the legal battles and political stakes. The legal implications are that multiple lawsuits and injunctions are ongoing, raising questions about federalism, state authority, and immigration control. The legal arguments involve complex interpretations of the Constitution and federal laws. And then there's the political divide. The situation reflects a broader political divide over immigration policy, with differing views on security, federalism, and humanitarian considerations. Both sides utilize different narratives and framing to garner public support. So, in other words, as I like to say, you have the National Guard and law enforcement. And it's not just the Texas National Guard. Several other states are sending their National Guard to help support, as well as law enforcement. Meanwhile, the Biden administration is sending federal officers. So there's the situation. Now moving forward, here's the potential outcomes. Possible scenarios include continued legal battles, further state actions with legal boundaries, negotiated compromises, or potential federal legislation addressing border security concerns. And then there's the importance of nuance. Understanding the situation demands avoiding oversimplification and acknowledging the range of perspectives, legal complexities, and ongoing debates. Responsible dialogue and critical thinking are crucial right now because we have the emphasis on civil war. Now, the union that represents the border officers, they already have sided with Texas. So that is a win for Texas. So now it remains to be seen what comes next. More federal law enforcement officers that are not border officers, or are they going to send the military? And that is a concern. It's basically chess. Now, my purpose is to provide factual information and avoid bias. While some may portray this as a defiance by Texas, other views it as a legitimate exercise of state authority within specific legal bounds. Remember, critically evaluating information from diverse sources and engaging in responsible discussions are key to forming informed opinions on complex issues like this. History has a tendency to rhyme, as I say. So I want to highlight a history lesson so that you can break away from that normalcy bias. The events of Fort Sumter. We'll start with that one. That's a lot of talks about Fort Sumter. So Fort Sumter, which happened April 12 through April 13, 1861, marked the official start of the American Civil War. And here's the breakdown of what happened. After several southern states seceded from the Union due to tensions over slavery and states' rights, they formed the Confederate States of America. And Fort Sumter, located in Charleston Harbor, South Carolina, remained under federal control despite being surrounded by Confederate territory. President Abraham Lincoln had decided to resupply that fort without reinforcements to avoid provoking the Confederates. And then comes the bombardment. On April 12th, at 4:30 a.m., Confederate forces under General P.J.T. Beauregard, and I could be butchering his name, but that's okay, opened and fired on Fort Sumter with over 30 cannons. Now, Major Robert Anderson, the Union commander, and his small garrison of 86 soldiers returned fire the next day, but their limited ammunition and outdated cannons hindered their ability to retaliate effectively. After 34 hours of bombardment, with the fort damaged and no hope of relief, Anderson surrendered on April 13th. Remarkably, no one was killed on either side, although 2 Union soldiers were mortally wounded during a celebratory 100-gun salute after the surrender. So they're saying that, oh yeah, 2 people died, but this happened during the 100-gun salute after the surrender. And here's the impact. The fall of Fort Sumter, through bloodless, had a momentous impact. It officially ignited the American Civil War, and this is a conflict that lasts 4 years and cost over 620,000 lives. It exposed the deep division of the country and shattered any remaining hopes of a peaceful resolution. It galvanized both sides, rallying supporters to their respective causes and solidified their commitment to fight. And here's some nuance and interpretations. Analyzing the Fort Sumter event requires acknowledging different perspectives. Southerners saw it as a necessary defense against federal aggression and a validation of their independence, while Northerners viewed it as an illegal attack on federal property and a blatant disregard for national unity. It's crucial to avoid simplistic or sensationalized narratives and instead seek diverse accounts and historical analysis to understand the events that's multifaceted. The fall of Fort Sumter in April 1861 wasn't just the official start of the American Civil War. It was a culmination of a long simmering tensions and conflicting ideologies. While the event itself may seem sudden, the path to war was paved with decades of disagreement over slavery, states' rights, and the very future of the United States. Similar to what we're going through now. I wouldn't say the slavery part, but we do have significant differences currently. And here's some of the tinderbox issues of the Civil War, the issues of slavery. And dominated the political landscape for decades, dividing the nation between pro-slavery and anti-slavery factions. The Missouri, the Missouri Compromise of 1850, the Kansas-Nebraska Act, were all attempts to maintain the fragile balance, but only served to fuel the fire. Then there's the economic differences. The North industrialized, focusing on manufacturing and trade, while the South's economy relied heavily on slave-grown cotton. Then there's the states' rights and federalism. Southerners fiercely defended states' rights, fearing federal overreach and potential threats to their way of life, including slavery. Now, underestimating these flames is something we need to consider. Despite these mounted tensions, most Americans believe the Civil War was unthinkable. Here's why. 1. Shared history and identity. Many citizens, especially in the border states, felt a strong sense of national unity and believed in compromise and political solutions. 2. Trust in institutions. Faith in the Constitution and the democratic process led many to believe the system could resolve differences peacefully. 3. Economic interdependence. Trade and business ties between North and South fostered a belief in mutual dependency and economic harm from conflict. And then there's 4. Limited understanding of the depth of division. While tensions existed, some underestimated the deeply entrenched ideologies and the willingness of both sides to fight for their principles. For some of you, that sounds very familiar. For many of you, it should be a wake-up call. Now, the election of Abraham Lincoln in 1860, seen by the South as a threat to their way of life, triggered the secession of several southern states. The Confederacy was formed, challenging the legitimacy of the federal government. Despite attempts at negotiations, Lincoln refused to acknowledge secession, which led to the Confederacy attacking Fort Sumter, a federal fort in Charleston Harbor. So that's something you need to consider as far as our political divide that we see currently, both culturally, morally, which if you have been following the podcast know that morals are norms that people see as ethical actions. This is something you need to really consider of our current situation. But the Civil War was a complex conflict with deep-rooted causes, similar to a lot of things that we're looking at today. Now, I'm not saying that the Civil War is inevitable, not by a long shot, but we need to take precautions and be careful and not adding fuel to the fire. This country, these United States, is going through a divide unlike we've ever seen. The political division has led to elected officials and political leaders demonizing their political rivals and their supporters. Families divided because they support a political person or group. Morality is in question based on norms that one side demands conformity over another. If this continues and now the situation at the border escalates, we will be seeing social media influencers live stream the start of a possible second civil war, not realizing what they're actually experiencing. And we must not forget that during the first battle, and during the Civil War, the actual Civil War, there were people picnicking because they believed it was not going to happen until that happened. And then, of course, the world is on fire with conflicts spreading throughout the Middle East. Let's not forget that Ukraine and Russia is still ongoing. There's talks of Venezuela and Ghana. And then, of course, there's China and Taiwan. We're squabbling with ourselves, just like the Russians during World War I. And I pray these tensions don't, die down. But with this, also being an election year, I know it's most likely not not the case. It's not going to happen. And for those of you that don't understand, the Russian Revolution, it happened during World War One. The Russian Revolution had two distinct phases of a larger conflict, and this is all during World War One. The February Revolution, 1917, which this revolution fueled by widespread discontent with the Tsar's regime's poor handling of the war, economic hardship, and political repression. Does that sound familiar to you? And it led to the abdication of Tsar Nicholas II and established a provisional government. And then that same year, the October Revolution, led by the Bolsheviks under Vladimir Lenin. And the Second Revolution saw the overthrow of the provisional government and the establishment of the world's first communist state, the Soviet Union. And World War One impacted the revolution by exacerbating the existing problems. Many people believe that in World War II, we helped us get out of our Great Depression. That is partially true. There's other factors, of course, but it is not the case today. If World War III was to break out, the United States does not have the means, the manpower, nor the political will within its people to fight a war, especially after a 20-year war on terror. And let me emphasize this war, and going back to World War One and the Russian Revolution. When I say exacerbated the problems, here's a list. It caused economic hardship, food shortages, and heavy casualties within the war, which fueled the dissatisfaction that was already in place. And it had a weakened government. The strain of the war stretched the Tsar's government's resources and exposed its military and administrative weakness. As they say, the emperor has no clothes. And then there's the radicalized population. The experience of the war and suffering radicalized many, making them receptive to radical ideologies like communism that promise change and solutions. And then when there's weakness in power, there's always a power vacuum. And the February Revolution's overthrow of the Tsar created that power vacuum, allowing the Bolsheviks, who were well organized and promised peace, land, and bread, to seize power in October. So, while the Russian Revolution had a complex underlying causes, World War I acted as a major catalyst, accelerating existing problems, weakening the government, creating an environment that was ripe for revolution. So we may not see a civil war in the United States, but a revolution. So these are things that we need to understand and be able to comprehend. History has a tendency to rhyme, not repeat. So let's make sure it does not rhyme by learning from it. And I pray that all of you stay safe. And I know I'm ending this in kind of a very negative note, but I will be posting more on self-improvement, critical thinking lessons, and things of that nature. But I felt like this was very important to discuss. I am debating, depending on time I have with my family and, of course, work, about creating a side podcast where I'll just have discussions with other people regarding current events. So stay tuned for that. I'm also will be releasing my courses on Udemy, Skillshare, and what have you, hopefully in the spring. Also, I would like for you to look at the description I have a link for you all for the Tuttle Twins. It's a great series of books for both young people and teenagers alike, and I highly encourage you to pick it up. It'll teach you things of critical thinking as well as history and other social sciences. It's great for the kids, it's entertaining. They have a cartoon that's in Angel Studio, so I highly recommend it. It's fantastic stuff. Uh, I hope you like, share, subscribe, comment below. Tell me what you think. If you want to add more context to the history lessons, by all means. If you want to discuss about stuff in the 10th Amendment, please comment also on that. And give me all your thoughts on this situation that we're facing. Um, I love you all. I wish you all the very best, and I'll see you in the next one.